For my final video, I want to discuss why computer science matters. And not why it matters to me. I know I've used examples from my field of astronomy and my subfield of cosmology, so of course that's going to matter to me, but I didn't have to use examples from my own field. We could have discussed engineering, how a rocket ship on the way to Mars is constantly sensing information about its environment and has some onboard logic, some decision-making process that maybe it just needs to correct its trajectory slightly to land on the red planet. We could have discussed migration across Wyoming, say pronghorn, and putting on radio collars to sense their movements and using visualization to track how they proceed across the state. We could have used examples from economics or business. We could have discussed analyzing data from the stock market as your input, as your information, and having processes that say, well, when this particular thing happens, if this happens, then the stock market tends to do this. And so therefore trying to make money from the stock market using information and computation. We could have discussed translation software, how you take a page of something written in English or a phrase or some sentences and try and understand how those are used in context so you can properly translate English into French or Mandarin Chinese or Latin. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, the difficult thing about computer science and defining it is not that it is itself difficult, it's that it has such a broad scope. I think one of the things that maybe terrifies people about computer programming is we've all seen the movie or the TV show where somebody turns around from a keyboard and there's just lines and lines of computer code on the screen and it looks incomprehensible. And the truth is it's not that difficult. I mean, certainly over 10, 20 years of really expert thinking about it, you might get to the point where you're writing computer code like that. But initially, it's just a way of seeing the world. It's a way of taking inputs, manipulating them, and getting some results. And why it's really important is, I told a story of how 20 years ago, most astronomers would just go to a telescope by themselves, collect information for one project, take it home, look at the images of the sky and do one piece of science with it. And how now I'm involved in collaborations of hundreds of people, if not nearly 1,000, have automated telescopes that are scanning the sky all of the time to do big science results. How that shift has happened in a 20-year period. I suspect that shift has already happened in other fields as well. But if you have students, I guarantee that 10, 15, 20 years from now, whatever field they choose, they're going to be using aspects of computer science. They're going to be collecting information and they're going to be manipulating it. And I don't want to put that in the context of, well, if you don't teach them about computer science, they're going to fall behind, although that could certainly be true. I want to put it in the context of picturing that world. Picturing a world where automatically, when you get up in the morning, your house has sensed the environment around it and has changed the internal humidity, the internal temperature to be perfect. A world where you're walking along the streets and you're like, yeah, 20 years ago there used to be a restaurant here that I loved, and it used to have that one particular dish that I really enjoyed. What was that? And your phone has already anticipated that you want to know that information, and it's just sitting on the screen ready for you to look at. I want you to picture a world where our biggest problems, we can address them and we can solve them. And it may seem like a stretch from, well, this week I started manipulating little blocks of code and I started taking some information from sensors and doing little things with it. But it all builds on that. You can easily get from just tiny little questions in your classes about how do I write code, how do I take information and have if-then logic and automate things. And you can get, I promise, 20 years from now, you can get to humankind on a rocket ship to Mars.